All right, welcome to the Better Than Me podcast. And this is John Conover. I got my buddy Ben Sheppard on here. And I'm already laughing because, like, when it comes to the Better Than Me podcast, there's only one thing that I can have Ben on here for, that's talking about business. It's certainly not his golf game. And so Ben is married to Samantha, daughters Aubrey and Emily, and he's been in business since 2004. We work in the same field, actually with the same company. And but Ben has also been in a lot of other businesses. And Ben, I'm grateful you're able to be on today. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, how you got started, and all the businesses you've been a part of. I'll interrupt you from time to time.
I thought I would just make fun of you for 40 minutes or something here. No.
We'll give some space for that.
Hopefully we can make a few people laugh if they don't learn anything this morning. But yeah, quick background on me in terms of becoming an entrepreneur. I guess the first thing I should talk about is I didn't really grow up in an entrepreneurial family. My dad was very successful in corporate America. He was a director for Procter and Gamble, and all I basically knew was growing up was you go to school, you get a degree, you get a good job. I watched my grandfather work for DuPont for 40 years. And so education in my house was big. Working your way up the corporate ladder was big. And
like all the cliche stuff that everyone
I have I'm not good at a lot of things in life, but one of the things I'm pretty decent at is detecting when something is off or it's BS. And I found very quickly two things mostly were BS to me. One was most of the college education world. Now I have 2 degrees, one in finance, one in economics. But I got to tell you, I learned way more about investments and finance and economics, trading my own stock portfolio in college than listening to business professors that had never run a business in their entire lives. So I'm like, why are we spending 2 years of 4 years on gen ed, right? They want to tell us that we need to be well-rounded or diversified. That's actually the opposite in business. In business, the more you focus on one area, the more you specialize, the more money that you make. And we can relate that to the sports world as well, right? Michael Jordan, really, really darn good at basketball. But when we saw him on a baseball field, he was a good athlete, but he wasn't elite. Right. We think about my oldest daughter just had surgery, and I think about how much the anesthesiologist made for, helping her go to sleep, right? So oftentimes you make more money by being really, really good at one thing. There's a book called The Tipping Point, and I think they talk about 10,000 hours. So again, yeah, I basically toned out in college, right? Because it was kind of like I graduated with a 3.9, but I just found most of it to be a complete waste of time because none of these business professors that, by the way, have been academia their entire life, not one of them ran a business.
Yeah, it's like if you can't do it, teach it.
Right. So like I would have been better off. Now, again, it's not that I want my kids to have an education, but I'm real big on how does this relate to the real world? What are the practical steps? My 12 and 15-year-old ask me all the time, Daddy, am I going to ever use this algebra or whatever their subject is later on in life? And the answer is probably not. And I try to help them understand what really matters, right? Their faith in God, their work ethic, their communication and people skills. So that was the first thing that my BS pinger went off is education system is mostly broken. It's also very sad where you had the government get overly involved, guarantee all the student loans. I graduated college in 2003. I mean, and education's gone almost triple up since then in terms of inflation. Do we really think we're getting 3 times the value of education at this point?
So BS meter is super important. My BS meter goes up every time you ask for strokes on the golf course and then you want to bet. And I know I'm always giving you an extra stroke or two per nine. And then that's probably why you take my money.
Yeah,
So,
you know, I do admit you're a better golfer than me. It's painful for me to say that.
well, come on. That's like the one thing that I got. That's the one thing I got.
But yeah, I'm not going to do a match where I don't figure out how to win before the match starts. Yeah, that's all part of it. But the second thing for me was I got the first good job that I could find out of college, right? So I knew I wanted to be in financial services, but starting out, I wanted to get a good job, right? Which there's no such thing, but for me, I was sick of being a broke college student. You know, I certainly didn't want to start my life out with Samantha, completely entrepreneurial. I wanted to have a decent income right out of college. So I took a job. And I was making about $100,000 a year, but I began to realize how much I was making for the company. It was like 15 million plus, and I was the dude at work that was literally doing the math every single day in terms of how much am I making the company versus how much I'm getting paid, micromanaged all the time, pit my stomach Sunday night. So, but one of the principles of growth, if this podcast is about business and entrepreneurship, but one of the principles of growth is you really have to hate where you are to make any changes. It's got to be painful. So for me, I was like, I just can't do corporate America. Like, I'm not going to rent my life away to a company that doesn't give a rip about me for 30, 40 years just so I can have a little bit of money in a 401k. That seems
and
like
I think there's something I'd love to interrupt on there because for a lot of people that listen to this, there's a nugget in there, but I think there's also like a realization for some people that some people hate their job or they hate their boss, they hate their commute, they hate their schedule, or whatever, they hate the pay. But then they half-ass it, right? They don't like what they're doing, so they don't give it everything they got. They don't really find themselves in growth mode, and they quit their job. They try to go into business, but they've never learned the principles of success. They really didn't make their former company a lot of money. They really didn't climb the ladder. They didn't do what they were supposed to do where they were at. And then they transition into business and they get exposed very, very quickly. You didn't really take that route. You were like, no, I don't like my job, but I'm still going to give it everything I got. And I'm going to make the company a lot of money. I'm going to figure out how to succeed wherever I am. Is that true?
So I couldn't stand the micromanage aspect. I couldn't stand my boss, but because of the way I was raised in my faith, I always try to work as into the Lord. So I hated my job. I thought it was ridiculous. Not that I'm saying I wasn't thankful, but I was like, I'm going to work under the Lord regardless of how I feel about the people that I'm working with. To your point earlier, I just think a lot of people are just so comfortable. Although there's a lot of things in this country right now that are it's not going well in a lot of areas. We still have it a lot better than a lot of other people in the world, right? So
Sure.
I think you could be middle class or whatever in America, and you could be very comfortable. So what I think a lot of people need to realize is it's not really about paying bills. It's not really about being comfortable. It's about playing to your God-given potential. And that's a different playing field because it's not really about, a lot of things that don't matter. It's about what am I doing to get better? What am I doing to grow? I never really thought about making a lot of money. I just thought about serving and helping people and getting better. And it's interesting that as you get better, you bring more value to the marketplace, and then your income is directly proportionate to the value that you bring to the marketplace. But I needed to get to the point in corporate where I was like, this is a joke. I'm not doing this, to begin to take steps. And I, of course, at that point, did a lot of research. I was looking for something, found a good fit in financial services. And John, what I did is I started part-time, and I meet so many people that want to be an entrepreneur, but the challenge is they're not willing to take a couple years. Here's what happens. They make this emotional decision. I hate my job. I'm going for something, whatever it is, but they never really take the time to map out the price. So the two biggest reasons, in my opinion, that people fail is they go into business and they don't really take any time to do any of the math, any of the calculations. They have too much overhead and expenses before they make any money. So to me, the solution is find something you're passionate about and start doing it part-time. Hustle on the nights and weekends whenever you can. And once you're getting to the point where you're making more money part-time than your full-time job and it gets in the way, it makes sense. I think the second thing is there's a tremendous lack of humility. Some of the best business giants of all time, what they were very smart at is finding a really good coach and mentor that they were ahead of where they wanted to go. I find it exhausting when people are like, I know that, I already know what to do. And then you're looking at their steps and their numbers and everything. And it's like, no, you don't. So,
Ben, sorry, again, I think one of the nuggets there for a lot of people that are listening in on this, I'm paying attention to some of the details that I'm trying to pay attention to the details, some of the little things that you're saying that aren't so little. And one of them is I think a lot of people, they watch movies or read books, or they go on social media and they see Jeff Bezos, they see the Steve Jobs story, they see Apple, right? They read the story and they go, well, they went all in, right? They listen to guys like Grant Cardone, right? You got to go all in, right? And what I think a lot of people don't realize is, Mark Zuckerberg started his business in his college dorm, and it was part-time, making no money for a period of time, right? That Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were working for Dell when they started Apple, right? In their garage. So they were working for these guys didn't go all in. They really didn't.
Well,
they started
they went all in mentally, which is
correct.
most important, but they didn't go all in financially, and they still had something else to provide income. I think of it as a tuition cost, right? So if I'm starting a client out with a new portfolio and they're young and they're trying to pick stocks or whatever, I'd rather see them screw up with a little bit of money on Robinhood and actually learn some really good principles before they put a lot of money to work, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You can dip your toes in and start to have a little bit of financial success and then ease the transition. But, if you're listening to this, don't be afraid to start something part-time. Be lean and mean with your finances. I mean, so many people, even in our world, John, I see people are just hypocrites. They don't practice what they preach. I mean, I've tried my best to live below my means. I've tried to invest a lot of money. I've tried to be very, very responsible with debt. And it's amazing that so many people will increase their spending up to their income or more of their income. Get financially independent as quick as possible, because that's going to enable you to approach other businesses a lot differently. You're no longer starting a business to just make a few bucks. You're starting a business because you see maybe a big need that you want to provide a solution for, or you want to make some type of eternal, significant type of impact.
Right.
But if you're managing your money in a way that's not conducive to that, unfortunately, you're going to make a lot of big decisions short term. I mean, after, almost 20 years of helping people with their finances, one of the things that stands out to me all the time is the wealthy are looking way down the line. How does this impact my kids, my grandkids, future generations? The middle class are thinking about their next vacation, and the poor are living with a bunch of regret of what they didn't do in the past. And I'm not trying to make this a right or wrong thing,
Right.
but, you know, Stephen Covey in his book talks about thinking about your funeral. So you work like crazy in the short run, you grind, but you also think about what impact does this have long term. I think sometimes if we have a more eternal or a long-term perspective, we're probably going to run things a little bit differently. I think a lot of times entrepreneurs getting started are still so focused on where they are and not where they're going, that they make a lot of dumb mistakes. So I think, you know, getting back to your original question, those are the two things for me that was like, okay, I needed to know corporate America sucks. And I needed that to be very, very painful, the thought of being involved in it long term. And then also from an educational perspective, I unfortunately, I think too many people are brainwashed to think that, you know, the only way I can have financial success is all these fancy degrees, and honestly has nothing to do with it. I mean, you highlighted a few entrepreneurs earlier that were high school and college dropouts.
Right.
So you know, I don't know where we went at what point that we got to the point that we, you know, the society thinks that to be financially successful, you have to have a lot of college student loan debt. You know, to me, that's couldn't be further from the truth.
So Ben, after about 5 or 6 years part-time in the financial world, which I think was smart, you've even admitted before you probably should have gone for it sooner, but everyone's got their path in business. After 5 or 6 years of easing into this world, you became very successful in the financial business. You know, 7-figure income, crushing it, helping thousands of clients, training and mentoring other advisors. You were actually a big part. You know, for those that are listening, I drove from Reading to York, Pennsylvania, where Ben's office is, and that was like an hour drive. I drove there every Tuesday for a securities training, like an investment training, for an hour and a half. I did that for a year. I did that for, I think, a year and a half. I did that, and it helped me out. So you've helped a lot of people, you've mentored a lot of people, but you've also saved and invested your money. You owned a hotel, you a golf course, a restaurant. I don't know how rental properties. Talk to us about the other businesses, pros and cons, about the other stuff that you've gotten into. I think a lot of people would find that intriguing.
Yeah, so I would say the first thing that I treated like a business was my personal finances and my net worth. I mean, I try to practice what I preach. I try to manage my personal portfolios like a business, whether it's real estate, crypto, physical precious metals, stocks, bonds, whatever. I treat that like a business. So that was first and foremost, is the idea of my money making money and working harder than me was very, very attractive. And you know, I would label myself as a contrarian. When everybody and their brother wants to buy, that's typically when I want to sell. When everybody and their brother is giving up and there's panic and there's fear, that's when I want to back the truck up. And, you know, we've all heard the old adage, you know, be greedy when other people are fearful, but that was a principle early on that I absolutely tried to implement. I mean, you share with me that there's a lot of people, you know, getting involved in real estate right now. Listen, when I get 6 texts per week about some random person trying to make an offer on my house that they've never seen, if that's not a bubble, and you don't feel like that's a bubble, I think you're living in a cave. You know, I think the real estate market is, I think the top was about 5-6 months ago. Now, we're not going to see the crash that we saw in 08 because you don't have a bunch of subprime mortgages under the hood like we had last time. There's also a huge inventory problem. The builders stopped building after 08. So there's still a shortage. But listen, when we go from 2.5% interest rates 12 months ago to almost 7 now, If you don't think that there's going to be some type of correction when you factor in the interest rates with affordability, you're not paying attention. So again, that's what I've tried to do is look at what's undervalued, what's hated, what's in an uptrend, and can I get on that early, and just recognizing the opportunity, right? So in your personal investments, your business ventures, I would encourage you not to follow the herd. I think everybody's trying to chase a return or chase an opportunity instead of putting a real strategy in place. Rogers is one of the best investors of all time, and he in his one book, I forget the name of it, but he talks about that oftentimes the best thing to do is to wait in the corner of the room until a big pile of cash shows up on the other side, and you might have to wait a few years to go pick it up, but that's what you need to do. The point he was trying to make is sometimes the best investment is to not make an investment at all. Right? With real estate, people want to get started, but you make 100% of your money on the purchase price. Right? So if I can't buy something undervalued or on sale, I'm not doing it. I'll wait a couple of years to get back in and back the truck up when everybody and the brother is hating everything about it, and I can get better prices. So that's one thing. I mean, just be contrarian. You want to have your money work hard for you. You want to take action, but sometimes sitting out is the right move. I think it's very, very important who you go into business with, integrity, making sure that all of that looks good. I think if you're ever buying a business from somebody else, I think it's very important to look under the hood to actually really get to know the financials as well as possible. Obviously, apologize for my coffee maker in the background. I think if you're looking for a business and someone's looking to sell the business, you really have to figure out, why are they selling this, right? It's just like, it's similar to real estate. You know, you're looking for a really good situation, but you almost want like a desperation. So you cannot pay too much. And it's a situation where, hey, maybe this person inherited the business and they just don't want to run it. They don't want the headaches, but there's a lot of opportunity. I'm sure you guys are aware of second and third generation businesses. For whatever reason, a lot of kids don't maybe connect with all the grind and paying the price as the original person that started it, and maybe they're running things into the ground. But yeah, man, just making sure you study the financials, study the assets, have a really, really good team. My real estate company, I run it with my best friend, and we have a blast, and we're on the same page. I don't have to worry about any integrity issues. I've known him forever. We make decisions together. We're 100% on the same page. I've run my financial services business, really with my wife from day one, 100% on the same page. So I would say be very, 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 very careful in terms of who you go into business with, because people could be talented, people could maybe bring something to the table, but when you have to make really important decisions and you don't see eye to eye, and maybe there's integrity issues, it becomes a problem. So that's what I think you also have to realize what stage of life that you're in. Like, my kids are 15 and 12, so I'm scaling back with a lot of things right now outside of my financial services business. I'm, of course, putting a lot of focus on my clients, but just recognizing I've got a couple years left with my kids until they're kind of out of the house. So I know the grind to get another business started. So I'm not looking to do that for a couple years, because I want to spend as much time with my kids as possible. And what I'll say to that is, I did miss a lot of time with them when they were really young, because I was grinding, I was building my business, but now I want to spend a ton of time with them. And then I'll relook at stuff down the road once they're out of the house and I've got more time. So that's for me, you know, just recognizing seasons of life. I've heard of a book where it was written by a hospice nurse. And basically, I think what she talked about was the number one, when I asked people on their deathbed about their number one regret, it was not spending more time with their kids.
So many people are working those corporate jobs. They're spending 2 hours a day in the car driving. They're doing overtime. And they look at going into the business world as, well, I've got to sacrifice time with my kids. I think what you've done is you spent probably 3 to 5 years, you know, probably closer to 5 years on the sacrificing side, but it's giving you now tons of freedom. You know, whether you guys are looking at the financial world or any business, the goal ought to be to develop passive income, which is, I mean, that's what a business is, right? So your financial services business has that built in, the residual income that comes in without having to grind. And it turns into a service business, and you can hire people to do service. And now you're spending way more time with your kids. Your business is growing on autopilot. I mean, that ought to be the goal of anybody that's going into business, is begin with the end in mind, right? You have this end in mind, which is, I want to spend more time with my family. I want to have freedom, right? And you work towards that, not just paying bills and not just earning income, not just buying a big house, not just going on vacations. It's freedom. Can you talk to, as we wrap up here, maybe the last like 10 minutes, some of the things you did early on, specifically in the financial world, because that's your main business. But things like, you could talk about habits and routines, marketing, mastering your craft, some of those things that you think maybe those were the variables or the things that you did that created the biggest impact on your success. Maybe talk about that stuff.
Well, you brought up a couple things that made me think about a couple key points as well before I get into that stuff.
Yeah.
First thing is, everybody wants to have multiple streams of income, but the mistake is they try to do that right off the bat. I think it's dumb. I think you develop one great stream of income and then it could really funnel everything else. Because a real business that's going to pay you a ton of passive income, it's going to take a couple of years of intense focus to get it off the ground. So that would be number one. Stop. You know, I would joke to say, you know, people want to have 10 streams of income where they're making dozens of dollars at each one, right? Why don't you just build a big business that creates a massive passive income to fund other things? I think the second point, when I get to maybe grinding down the road when my kids are out of the house, I think it would be more, hopefully in more of a Shark Tank type role. Not that I want to take advantage of people, but I would rather invest my money in really, really good people, get a portion of the equity without physically being involved. Because to your point, passive income is huge. To be able to do what you want to do, and you got a bunch of mailbox checks coming in, that's what's attractive to me. But again, if you become financially independent, you build a good business that produces passive income, I think you could put yourself in a position to do that later. You know, in terms of a couple key things, man. Number one, I think you just have to decide for a period of time that you're going to work harder than anybody else. I mean, I know that doesn't sound very sexy, but when I look at my strengths, most things I'm not really good at. I don't have the best personality in the world. John will attest I'm an introvert. I don't even really like people very much.
You barely like me.
I mean, I definitely don't like you. But for me, it was, I knew for a couple years I had to pay the price. So like, I just blocked a calendar and I just worked really, really hard with intense focus for several years. Not saying I enjoyed all of that. But I decided to do that, and through building a client base, the second decision I made after the block calendar, working my tail off, was I'm going to try to provide as much value as I can to my client base because
Service, education, returning.
service,
Yeah.
education, treating people the way I would want to be treated. And what came out of that obviously is massive referral stream that you can't stop. But I had to be willing to, in the beginning, work really hard and get a ton of no's so I can get a few yeses. But the few yeses consistently over a couple years leads to a massive referral base.
And how much in assets right now do you manage? You know, people's retirement accounts, IRAs. What's the number approximately?
Through my group of advisors, because I'm not all doing it personally, and I have a really, really good staff, but we're over 250 million right now, and that
$250 million
in the next 3 years, that will be well over $1 billion, you know, in terms of total AUM. But
wow.
Again, in the beginning, you know, it's not easy. Thank God it wasn't easy, right? Because to me, if something's easy, everybody and their brother is going to do it, and there's no real opportunity. I mean, you mentioned real estate earlier. I think 9% or 10% of the realtors sell 90% of the houses. So that's the question you got to ask yourself. In whatever business that you're in, what's going to separate you or differentiate you from all the other people, right? What are you going to bring to the table from a value proposition that your client has an amazing experience, that your clients become raving fans of you?
I love that.
Right? Why are you better than every other John Smith in your industry, right? That's what you have to focus on. And again, when you self-improve, which unfortunately some people do a little bit of that in the beginning and they stop. But if you keep getting better, if you keep growing, if you keep studying, the more I've studied about finance and investments, the more I realize I don't know much of anything. No, I'm serious.
Yeah, no, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
100%. So, you know, you got to stay humble. You got to stay humble. You got to stay hungry. So I think those were two key things. And the third thing is, from a marketing perspective, you do have to have a strategy and a plan, and it's got to be well thought out. So Samantha and I were very strategic. She has a marketing degree, so she was a lot of help, but very strategic with what are the forms of marketing that we're going to do to generate enough leads, to generate enough appointments, which obviously are going to lead to clients, and then being consistent with that. So many of these entrepreneurs, they just have zero plan. So think about a successful business in this country that doesn't have a clear, defined path in terms of marketing, that, you know, you're not going to find it. So don't expect to grow. Don't expect to have a successful business if you don't really have a clear path and strategy with your marketing plan. It's not just throw a bunch against the wall and see what sticks. Yeah, there's no's, there's hard work, but strategically, what are you doing to generate quality leads as you're starting your business? I think is really important.
Well, Ben, that's spot on. I think that's a good, kind of a good stopping place. I know one of the big factors is being mentally tough as well. We didn't really touch a lot on that, but I know for you, being a Detroit Lions fan, you've had to be mentally tough. And so any comments on that?
Hey, they're on the upswing, I think. So
Hey.
This podcast, what February of 2023, mark my words, the Lions will win the NFC North Division. And I'm a bigger Michigan fan than Lions fan. So those of you that are Penn State fans, you know, Ohio State fans, you guys have had to look up at us the last couple of years. So I'll just throw it out there. But yeah, man, that's a really good point. So that would probably be another one of my strengths would be I don't give a rip what anybody thinks about me. But you know, John can attest to that. Like I just don't care. Like it's amazing to me. Like you know, I could do an entire podcast on the reasons people don't win, and that would be in the top 5.
Easily.
That you guys allow unsuccessful, negative people that aren't paying your bills to rent space in your head. And I just find that ridiculously exhausting to me. I care what God thinks. I care what my wife and my daughters think. And honestly, probably very few other people, if any. I just don't care. So, and what's so interesting, you know, I was made fun of when I started, and, you know, I've employed some of those people later on in other businesses. You know,
The cliche on social media
you know,
is
when
your haters start asking you for a job.
When your haters start asking you for a job, like just like you guys have to get over that. Like if you get nothing out of today's podcast, you have to have a resolve that you're more success conscious than image conscious, right? So I'm not on social media at all. You know, my wife is, but I'm going to say a couple things here that I think are really important to today's world. One, you know, one of my best friends, pastor says, you know, smartphones are dumbing down society, right? If you think about the average person spends almost over 25% of their life, their year, looking at their phone and scrolling. So rather than you guys caring so much about how many people like you and whatever you're looking followers, right? Begin to think deeply about what you actually want and really map out your plan for success, right? So, you know, I'll go to a restaurant and you got a family of 4 and they're spending their entire time on their phone instead of actually talking to each other. I think we're in this world that, yes, technology is important. Yes, your influence, you know, whatever, your marketing, a lot of it's going to be social media. Please don't misunderstand me. But I think what happens is we're going away from thinking deeply about what we actually want. And actually, you know, everybody wants to set a goal, but nobody wants to actually figure out what is the price that I have to pay to hit this goal. And oftentimes that price is, hey, maybe people don't like you. Maybe you get a lot of no's. Maybe you get made fun of. Maybe someone's critical of you. Who the flip cares, right?
Ben, I think
at the end of the day, if I'm, you know, able to write checks to my church or missionaries, obviously pay cash for my kids' college, whatever the case may be, I'm not going to look back and say, man, when so-and-so made fun of me, that really hurt. I mean, right?
Who cares? Well, and we'll finish with this because I think it's a great, like, we put a pin in it. We can even have you back on. There's other stuff we could talk about, but people overemphasize, well, you got to do what you're passionate about to a point, but then they do what they're passionate about, but they don't pay an actual price. It's like price is part of the passion, right? That the deeper your passion for success in that area, the deeper the price you're going to have to pay. Great stopping point. I want to have.
But one more thing.
Go, please.
Sorry. One more principle.
Yeah.
One more principle. I interviewed a very successful business owner a couple of years ago. Very successful. And I said, I always like to pick people's brain. What was the one thing that you learned in 40 years in business? He said, honestly, I was willing to do what almost everybody else wasn't willing to do.
There it is.
And oftentimes the things that are the hardest, the things that you don't want to do the most are exactly what you have to grind on for a couple of years to explode your business.
Love it. Awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Don,
appreciate it.
Can't wait to make fun of you soon, brother. Have a good one.
Hey, I'm going to stop the recording.